Hello, today we're going to be reacting to the new Secret of the Mimic Game Theory, and some reasons because it's caused a bit of discussion within the FNAF fandom, and so I want to check it out and react to it, and I will be giving my own thoughts and theories. So yeah, let's get into the video. Okay, so it begins off with your typical, after a new game comes out thing, everything we know about FNAF is a lie, which is typical, but it's probably not what it's
known about FNAF was a lie. Or was it?
So, to get the gist of it, this video is going to go over whether or not William Henry just stole everything from Edwin, or whether there's more of like a nuanced, complicated answer to it. And I feel like that latter is going to be what's revealed in this theory. Obviously, I feel like, yes, some things were taken from Edwin, but I feel like they were proposed maybe by Henry, and Edwin sort of sorted that out, give the contract to Edwin, type thing, like the way companies do. But I feel like it's sort of like a combination. Got Henry's ideas, Edwin's improved on that, and then eventually they've just gone back to Henry's plans after whatever happened to Edwin. I just feel like it's a lot more complicated than William and Henry stole everything, because it would just be a bit mad after all these years to have everything that we know be by just random character that's only just been introduced. So I feel like there's just a little bit more complications to that, and yeah.
We have to clarify. Did William and Henry actually steal Edwin's inventions? And the short answer is no. I've mentioned in a past few theories little tidbits of information about this, but while it was clear Fazbear had some shady business practices and were actively stealing employees trying to obtain company secrets, which is not totally legal, they never actually stole Edwin's intellectual property. Edwin was a contractor, and so they would have contracted him to make stuff for them, like the demo of Freddy Fazbear's Pizza that we see in the R&D department. And that whole process would have included contracts that decided ownership, which we sadly never get to see. I can tell you though, as a former contractor myself, typically those contracts favor the client, the person who came to you to be a contractor.
Yeah, that's just basically what I've just said about the contracts and that, isn't it?
Would shoot or edit a video for someone, that would then go back to them and they would own the final product. I didn't own anything. But what about Chica, who was made for Chica's party?
Exactly. The best thing is about it, best way as an example is like, so the Titanic, it was funded by the White Star Line. They contracted Harland and Wolff to build the Titanic. However, once the Titanic was passed over to White Star Line then owned the Titanic. It wasn't Harland and Wolff's. Obviously when it came to the other ships like the Olympic and stuff like that, they'd contract Harland and Wolff to repair, fix and everything. However, Harland and Wolff would not actually own that ship once it's been passed over to the White Star Line.
Well, not Fazbear. So yeah, or Roxy and Foxy, who were built for Edwin's TV show idea. Those were definitely Edwin's, and Fazbear surely had no rights to them. Well, until they did. One of the text logs you can obtain is from Willie A himself, and while the message is cut off a bit at the start, the intention is very clear. Quote, software development and the entire MCM catalog. We would love to keep you on as a lead engineer. Although we now technically own the land, we would never touch the house your parents built. Afton was offering Edwin a position at Fazbear because he had just bought MCM, its remaining employees, the ground it's built on, and most importantly, its catalog of characters and inventions. Fazbear now owned everything. They never stole it from Edwin, they just stole all his employees, drove the business into the ground, and then bought the rights so that they could claim it as their own. But let's be honest here, that's kind of a small nitpick in this whole thing. The real issue here is that we believed Henry and William were these great inventors, and yet it seems like they just kind of bought everything and didn't make any of it themselves. How could Henry claim
trapped in prisons of my making
if they weren't his making at all? So let's take a look and try to clear things up. Henry may not be the originator of most of the characters we've attributed to him over the years. R.I.P. Chica was Henry's first theory, but that doesn't mean he didn't invent any characters. From the minute you step into Murray's costume manor, you will find one item that appears everywhere in the...
I feel like from sort of sister location up to the point of sister location, we kind of knew Chica wasn't really originally a Freddy's character, due to the fact that it's like Chica's party bill and stuff like that. We got that indication from sister location, so it kind of makes sense that Chica isn't a Henry original type thing. It was maybe someone else's, but yeah, no, let's carry on.
facility. Pizza boxes from Fredbear's family diner. Now, while we're visiting MCM, the place has been abandoned for a bit. But what that means is that while the place was active, so was Fredbear's diner, which makes sense given Fazbear Entertainment was a thing and had the means to buy MCM in the first place. They need some way to make money. We also see Fredbear and Spring Bonnie on a number of posters throughout the place, identical to the ones we found in Security Breach. But notice what we don't see throughout MCM. Despite promoting posters for the characters of Fredbear's, we never see versions of Fredbear or Bonnie within the main facility. And that is because of this line.
Every one of my creations are available for purchase or lease.
For Edwin to be able to say that, he would have to own the rights to the characters. But the fact that Bonnie and Freddy are missing implies that those two characters were not created and owned by Edwin, but instead William and Henry. Edwin has posters on the walls because there's clearly a long-standing relationship between the two companies, and based on his audio log telling us that they should
just hire some teens to wear the suits like we always do.
It seems like he has worked on the diner in some way. So the posters are just him promoting himself, going, hey, you know this successful franchise? Well, I helped make that. But he can't show any of the costumes or animatronics for Fredbear and Bonnie because he doesn't own the rights. They were created and owned by William and Henry. So nice big tick for them there. But that leads us into the big discussion around Fazbear.
Spring lock assembly may be required.
No!
No! Hazards that could
Are you kidding me?
Oh my god!
Henry didn't even invent the spring
Oh
locks.
my god!
Did Edwin invent the spring locks? Before this point, we've been under the impression that it was Henry who invented the spring locks, as during the Silver Eyes trilogy, we're pretty much told that outright.
Yeah.
Quote, these are spring locks, one of the first ones Henry made. But now in Secret of the Mimic, we see plenty of spring lock suits. We see messages about Edwin making them, and we even get to travel around.
When it comes to spring locks, I feel like they were contracted by Henry in the sense it was his design, but Edwin's gone out to make, them safer. However, obviously they've gone with Henry's design where it's, as we know, not that safe. I feel like Henry did create the spring locks in some way.
Inside them, which is kind of horrifying. However, there is one big detail that stands out pretty quickly, which made me reconsider whether this was another acquired contraption. The fact that we cannot be killed by the spring locks. Spring lock suits are notoriously finicky, causing fatal injury at the first sign of sudden movements or water, and yet we managed to fall through an entire floor and yet sustain no injuries. It's almost as if they are not the same kind of spring locks, and that is exactly the case. We receive a text log from Edwin during the game that specifically talks about updating the spring locks to sustain water damage and be okay. There's also the fact that the original spring locks were designed to be both suit and animatronic, while the new ones seem to only really be suits. And finally, the versions of Fredbear and Spring Bonnie down in the R&D department, while looking somewhat like the versions we know, have colored exoskeletons made of metal, rather than the felt-based material that would stain and discolor like we know from modern Springtrap. And to top that off, there's an audio log in the same area that talks about spring locks being used for a long time before this moment.
It would be so much easier to keep using the spring locks.
The fact that there have been spring locks used for Hen, while these new improved metal versions of the spring locks for Fredbear and Spring Bonnie currently only exist down here in the facility, it tells us that there are other spring locked versions of these characters in existence, felt-based ones that use the old water damage prone designs. So that's it, case closed. Edwin made the new spring locks, but Henry can still have made the originals, right? Well, I really wanted that to be true. Believe me, I did. But when Ash and I went back to find all the secrets on GT Live, we discovered this message on one of the Mrs. Helpfuls to Edwin from Fiona.
I'm worried about the new suit design. One of my costumers, Vic, nearly lost his hand today. All he did was spill a can of pop and the thing snapped shut like a bear trap.
Fiona is worried about Edwin's springlock designs, and the one her team member was wearing does end up having an issue with water damage. It's almost like that text log we read earlier was a response to Fiona's request to check out the problems, because Edwin was involved in the creation of the original designs. This isn't the only time Fiona is worried about Edwin rushing out designs that later cause problems either.
You have a lot of new ideas and new projects coming in. The staff can't keep up with all your changes, but I think you need to step back a little and focus on one project at a time.
This is a
See, the way Twitter was going on about this theory, you think it was the worst theory in the world. It's not. It somewhat makes sense, and I can see what they're trying to do. They're trying to work around whether or not, Henry and William are just the world's biggest thieves ever. But I think, like I said, I feel like it's one of them. Secret of the Mimic is the start of it. You know what I mean? We found bits and pieces out through Secret of the Mimic. Yeah, it's annoying because these games now take years to make rather than months, so you're waiting ages for these lore reveals. But it's not necessarily a terrible theory in a sense. Yeah, I feel like this is a very early days Final Phase theory. If you get me, like something you would get from Final Phase 2, Final Phase 3. Do you know what I mean? And I feel like that's what people need to remember. Secret of the Mimic is it's not just restart and rebooting the series or anything, but it's a new game in a new story that's ventured off from the main story that we got with the first few games. So we've got to remember, we're going to have theories like this that are going to be like, some fans are going to be like, oh, this is awful, this is terrible, what about so-and-so? I feel like right now we're at a stage with FNAF where we've just got to wait maybe another game to find out exactly what it is, and maybe then we can start using the older lore. I'm not saying we can't use the old lore, by the way. I'm not saying like the old lore doesn't apply to this. Obviously it does. What I'm saying is, just because we got told something in one game by one character doesn't mean it's going to apply to this game, because this game could be exploring a different avenue, the different side of it. We're getting told one side by a certain set of games, now we're getting told a different side to it, and so obviously we're going to spawn theories like this. So yeah, I think it feels like we've got to go back to that early days of FNAF theorising, back to the basics.
Of behaviour for Edwin. He sprints through dozens of projects, moving on to the next one so fast that his previous invention isn't fully finished, leading to a bunch of failures and returns like we see in the text logs. And so the idea that these springlock suits that were incredibly dangerous and faulty were also Edwin's creations actually makes a lot of sense for his character. And yes, there is a chance that the original springlocks were potentially a collaboration between both Henry and Edwin. But right now, I'm just not sure the evidence is there. The books say that Henry was the inventor of the springlocks, but that's a very different continuity. The games have never made that claim. The closest we get is
prisons of my making.
But here, Henry is talking about the normal animatronics, the ones that Edwin never finished. And so you could plausibly say that Henry was the one who made them. Edwin did say that Henry was the one changing the designs.
I got the change order from Hen last night. Why change it now? Now they changed their minds. Well, we're so close
Henry
to final.
Obviously
The concepts are frankly creepy.
But he never.
See, so yeah, those audio logs did all confirming that Henry did have some input when it came to the animatronics and their designs. He was telling them what to make, and I feel like that sort of implies that Henry had some sort of creative involvement. And so, yes, the original concept, the ideas, the plans, designed by Henry, developed and made by Edwin. And obviously Edwin is his own creative genius, he's got his own input, and that's where we're hearing his creative side come from. And it kind of sounds like Edwin is the one making these and creating these, but it's not. It's probably Henry giving them the contract, giving them the blueprints, the plans and everything, and he wants him to create them because, like I said, he's got the workforce, he's got the factory, he's got the numbers, he's got the manpower. And like I said, sorry to repeat myself, Edwin is his own creative genius and he tries to put his own input and spin on it. But obviously Henry's got this contract, Henry wants to do it a certain way. And then you've got William, who seems to be very money. That's why it probably goes downhill, because William's looking at the money. Henry's designs are cost efficient, dangerous, but they're not going to cost them that much. Whereas Edwin's input and design, yes, they might be safer, but they might be more expensive. That's how I'm getting their partnership. William's the money, he's the one who decides what to go with. Henry is the one who designs it in a cost efficient way, the way he wants it. Edwin is the one that, yes, he's got the workforce now, but he's got his own creative genius, his own mind, and he wants to do better.
Mentioned springlocks. That doesn't make this a retcon, it's just a realigning of our understanding between the different continuities of these characters, which is basically what Secret of the Mimic did with all of the book continuities. In the novel trilogy, Henry made the springlocks, but in the games, it was Edwin. Who knows, maybe it'll turn out to be Afton in the movies. But thanks to the company failing and Edwin's eventual demise, the new springlocks for Fazbear's characters were never finished. Fazbear just had to keep using Edwin's old designs, so I guess you could say that it was cut karma that got Afton in the end, in more ways than one. And speaking of good old Willie A, what did he actually do? I mean, we've always known he's a bit of a scumbag, so I don't think his lack of inventions would be all that surprising. But just like I think we can still credit Henry with the creation of the normal animatronics, I think there are a couple of things Afton can be credited with creating himself, namely the Funtime animatronics and the Scoop. In Sister Location and Pizzeria Simulator, we found blueprints for these devices, and they all have copyright attributed to Afton Robotics. Of course, we know that Foxy isn't his OC, that one firmly belongs to Edwin and Fiona, and the whole stomach hatch design definitely borrows from Edwin's Springlock designs. But the animatronic part, the weird wiry bodies, we don't see anything like that from Edwin. The Scoop also, of course, bears resemblance to the Springlock crane that we find.
I feel like this is something we already know. We know from the Silver Eyes trilogy that Afton takes people's designs, takes people's inventions, and proves on them, if you get what I mean. He makes them in his way, his own twisted way, puts his own twisted thing on it. We're never going to discredit Afton as not a genius. He is. He very much is. I mean, he got away with that murder for God knows how long, do you know what I mean? He is a genius, he can create his own things, but it's had his own benefit. We see that he's selfish. If it benefits him, he will create it, and it's simple as that. And that's what we see. We see the animatronics the way. You can even see it when you can say like Henry's or Edwin's, whatever, is the base. Afton's is the improved, twisted version of them all. I think that's what we already know about Afton. He is being proven to be a genius time and time again, but in different ways that benefit him.
MCM, and that we then saw in Ruin. They have the ability to scoop something out of a costume or Springlock suit or whatever, but all the stuff about remnant injection and storage, that's all Afton, baby. Which means at this point, we're pretty even. Edwin did make a lot of stuff that we thought were Henry and William, but that doesn't mean they were completely incompetent or unable to make stuff themselves. However, there is one more thing that we need to discuss. One more invention that, if it was claimed by Afton, could affect the entire timeline as we know it. You see, everyone, and I mean everyone who played this game or watched someone else play it, have been very quick to point out the similarities between David Murray and Afton's son, the Crying Child. The most obvious similarity is their name. Thanks to a friend of the channel Hyperdroid and a handful of other theorists, last year we came to the conclusion that Crying Child's real name was also David Afton. But there's so much.
See, this I never actually got involved with David Afton. I just thought that was something again the FNAF fandom made up. But it makes sense that his name's David. It could be a little nod to the Silver Eyes. You know, William Afton uses alias Dave Miller, and so it could make sense that the Crying Child's name is David. But I feel like this is one of them where it's like it's just easier to use the word David instead of Crying Child, you know what I mean?
More to it than just a name. Their bedrooms look almost identical, and both of those bedrooms are in houses on top of a hill near a tree and near their father's work. They're both missing mother figures in their lives, with fathers who spend too much time working. One of the collectibles we get is David Murray's purple plastic telephone, the same one we see in David Afton's bedroom, along with a bunch of other similar toys. David Afton is famously scared of Foxy, having ripped off the head of the Foxy plushie, and his brother Michael bullying him wearing a Foxy mask. David Murray also is afraid of the pirate Fox, crying when Edwin uses one of the Foxy hand puppets on his first birthday.
Ahoy there!
Oh, honey, you're scaring him.
Both of them even have a birthday party for them coming up on a Saturday, only for them to die on that same birthday. Everything about these two feels identical to a strange degree, almost as if they're the same person. But obviously, as I've mentioned, David Murray is dead, so they cannot physically be the same person. But you know who is still alive and kicking? The thing that was created to become David Murray, M2. And this is where we hit an interesting fork in the road. There are two ways we can look at this information. There's the more literal approach, where the reason these two characters feel so similar is because they are the same character. M2 takes on the role of David, and Afton adopts it as his child. Or there's the less literal approach, the idea that these similarities are actually parallels designed to point us in the direction of a different kind of Fazbear theft, that they took more than Edwin's creations. They claimed his entire story.
See, I think this is what people are getting worked up about, the whole David is David type thing, Crying Child is David. I think it has a potential in a sense. It would wrap it up neatly, if you get me, because obviously in the fourth closet we realised that William did take one of the last Charlie bots. It was adult Charlie, and obviously turned it into baby in the fourth closet, so he does have the intention of robbing people's robot children. And we, for ages, a lot of things with the Silver Eyes, it translates into the games. It's not bang on, do you know what I mean? Different continuities and that, but we can learn from the Silver Eyes and apply it to the games in some sort of different way, like delusion discs, fear gas, stuff like that. And 9 out of 10, what happens in the Silver Eyes ends up happening in some way in the games. It's not identical, but it happens in some sort of similar way. And I feel like for ages we've been thinking, which one's the robot child? Because it's a very massive concept that is in the Silver Eyes trilogy, and I feel like it's like the biggest concept. So I've always wanted to know when it will appear, and it could be appearing now, because the mimic, as we saw in the end of like the FNAF 4 bedroom ending, it can go from an adult to a child, and it's very childlike. It sits on the bed, and it was just like cute, you know what I mean? Like it was like, oh, and knowing William, he's not past stealing children, and it could be applied to that whole the baby isn't mine type thing from Back to the Sister Location, that TV show. We've got the vampire adamant that the kid isn't his. Could be what he's talking about, you know, the crying child isn't his, and that's the whole we'll put you back together aspect. But again, it's one of them, another far-fetched theory that will upset the FNAF fandom in some way. And I think this is why, you know, we've got to remember this is a theory, this isn't fact, and I think that's the issue.
And because this is the big finale, I wanted to do something special here. Secret of the Mimic has been all about getting us to re-evaluate our past theories, our past ways of thinking. It showed us that we can't hold on to theories too tightly, that we need to be open-handed and explore all the possible options to us. And so, rather than stand here and try to convince you that one interpretation is right over the other, I wanted to present you with both options, explore the repercussions and flaws of each of them, so that you can come to your own conclusions. So, on the left is the ending where David Afton is M2, and on the right is the ending where Fazbear is trying to rewrite history. So, go ahead, make your choice, theorists. I'll see you on the other side.
So that was the brand new Game Theory that caused a lot of controversy. I will do those other 2 videos in separate videos, so that'll be part 2 and part 3, just because they're their own thing. But yeah, I can see why it might have caused a bit of feathers to be ruffled, don't get me wrong, but I feel like it's down to this whole idea now. So in the second part of his William is a Thief, he mentions confirmation bias. I've already reacted to that, by the way. So he mentions confirmation bias, and I think that's exactly what the FNAF fandom's got a lot of nowadays, and that's because there's so many different avenues now to take the FNAF lore. So when Five Nights at Freddy's first started out, it was sort of like we were guided by one person type thing, and there's only one way to sort of go. Don't get me wrong, there's so many different theories to play with and mess around with, but eventually you just pull for one direction. But nowadays people have sort of got their own way of theorising and stuff like that, and so it comes down to confirmation bias. You think something is correct, you're going to find the evidence. However, another person's perspective, you're not going to like it, and I think that's what it comes down to. And yes, this theory creates a lot of volatile reaction. Is it deserved? No. It's just a theory video, but I can see why people react in a certain way, because a lot of people who do not actually follow FNAF or take a deeper interest in it and only watch the Game Theory videos will watch this video and think, oh my god, FNAF is so complicated. It's not. This video actually wasn't that complicated. No, it didn't complicate anything at all. It's actually quite straightforward, but to someone, a casual fan or someone who just follows the FNAF lore through Game Theory, they're going to see this and think, oh my god, FNAF's ruined, FNAF this, FNAF that, and they don't actually see other angles to it because they don't actually follow the game. And I can see that's why the fandom's a bit, you know, tingle to it, because unfortunately a lot of people treat Game Theory videos as facts, even though it's in the channel name that it is a theory. And again, that's another issue within the FNAF fandom. So a lot of us treat theories as facts, and we believe our theories are true, when again they're just theories. So yeah, did I like the video? Yeah, it was a good video. I can see their angle, I can see their direction, and I might build my own. I might do William Afton and build my own theory off of their theory, just for a little bit of fun. But yeah, I can see both sides of it, and I did enjoy the video. I think it was quite good. I personally wouldn't be volatile towards it. It's their theory, fair enough. But yeah, thanks for watching, and look out for part 2 and 3.